The gospel text of today is made up of 13 verses. Chapter 7 of the Gospel of Mark, verses 1 to 13. And it speaks about the external and the internal. And in these verses, Jesus makes that distinction very clear. The text begins by telling us that people were watching the disciples of Jesus, and notice that they ate with defiled hands, or hands that were unwashed. They did not wash their hands before the meal. At the time of Jesus, external traditions were given a great importance. And so the people begin to complain not against Jesus because Jesus possibly washed his hands, but against his disciples. And the complaint is that the disciples are eating with unwashed or defiled hands. In his response, Jesus defends his disciples' stand by asking those who complain to look not only at the outside, but to look at the inside. It was Isaiah, Jesus said, who prophesied about a hypocritical generation which honors God only with the lips, but their hearts are far from God. So what Jesus is calling for is not lip service. It's not merely mouthing or reciting prayers. It's not merely saying prayers, but he is calling for prayers which stem from the heart. And that prayer which stems from the heart will be a prayer which does not condemn others. It will be a prayer which looks upon others with compassion. It will be a prayer which looks at others positively rather than sees the negative side in things. In these verses, Jesus gives an example of how many like to circumvent the law, like to go around it because they prefer traditions. Traditions stem from the law. The root is the law, and that is what we need to keep in mind. And the one law which Jesus gave his disciples was the law of love. But what people at the time of Jesus were doing, they were declaring some of their property as qurban or offered to God. And because they said that that property was offered to God, they would not allow any of their family members to use that property, because they would say to the member of the family that has been given to God. And when the family member went away, they would use it for their own means. So on the one level, they were talking about the commandment of God, and on the other level, they were circumventing that commandment when no one was looking. And so Jesus is calling us to go to the root and to the heart of the commandment. He is calling us to go to the basics of the commandment, which is a commandment to love. Everything we possess belongs not to us, but to God. However, God in his mercy has allowed us to use it not for our own selfish needs alone, but also to share with others. And so the gospel text of today is asking us to focus on our hearts first, and then to focus on the external. The German mystic Meister Eckhart says very beautifully, you should bother less about what you ought to do and think more about what you ought to be. Because if your being were good, your works will shine forth brightly. Will you focus on your being today and ensure that it is good, so that what you do will also be good?